So today the topic is about selecting, writing, and of course submitting a paper to a journal that you want to publish in. And following that, we would also move on to the kind of peer review process that you would face in a journal. Okay. Then following that, we will have a bit of a discussion about publishing ethics that you may have encountered during your writing and publishing experience with journals. And towards the end, I'll probably provide some simple resources to help you in your publishing journey in getting a paper published in a journal. And you can post all your questions to me now, but I'll only be able to answer them towards the end of the webinar, which will end at around 4 p.m. I'll be allocating about 20 to 30 minutes for the Q&A. So for those who might have other engagements after 4 p.m., don't worry, we will actually be recording this video all the way to 4 p.m. And the slides that I'm going to present will also be made available to those who have actually attended and also registered for this webinar itself. So don't need to worry too much about that. Okay. So firstly, I need to talk a little bit about the publishing landscape. Okay. So currently, within the academic publishing landscape globally, we have some data done by other researchers, and they have found that actually there are over 33,000 journals, okay, English language journals being published all over the world, whether big or small, by big or small publishers, commercial press, or university presses. So in addition to that, we also have about 9,000 plus non-English journals, okay, that means it's published in the native languages. So within these 33,000 journals, there are more than 3 million articles that are published each year. So you can see that there are more than 200,000 books also being published each year. Of course, definitely it'll be lesser than the kind of number of articles that we publish. But this is just a general overview of how the publishing landscape looks like currently. So within the sciences, the engineering and the medical journals, we have a total sort of a market size of 25 billion US dollars. Okay, and within the humanities and social sciences, it's much smaller, only about 2.5 billion annually. Okay, so as you can see, it is a pretty major business. Okay, and of course, there are a lot of big commercial publishers that are taking up the market for journal publishing. And of course, there are also very specialized small journal publishers or societies who also publish journals that are also of high quality. So what am I trying to say here? What you face as an author is you have a challenge. Imagine that there are now maybe 20 journals that you can submit your paper to. And out of these 20 journals, they only publish maybe, let's say, 100 articles each year. That means you are competing against everybody worldwide to get a chance to be published in the journal. So your challenge is actually to make your paper and of course yourself stand out from all the rest, okay? Stand out from the competition in that sense. So hopefully what I'm gonna share later would be somehow useful to you in improving the writing of the paper, in how you submit and select the kind of journals that you wish to publish your paper in. In the ecosystem itself, there are actually a lot of partners or players. We have the scholars or authors like yourself, the funders, the institutions or government agencies that provide the research funding, the libraries, which actually subscribe or purchase the electronic or the print editions of the journal issues. We also have publishers like Cambridge University Press and of course a few other commercial publishers who are the key publishing partners with all the rest of the partners in the ecosystem. And lastly, we also have the learned societies and professional associations, whereby the specific subject research area that you may be interested in, or would have a specific society or association for you to join as a member, and where they also publish their own journal. So all these different partners in the ecosystem of publishing, they are working together, okay, just to ensure that whatever is research is the quality is there, it gets published on time, and everybody gets to access it as far as possible. And it is a rapidly changing landscape, okay? The journal's business has only been digitalized only for 20 years, okay? Previous to that, it was all print, okay, print issues. And of course, books is also getting more important for ebooks, but definitely more or less journals is still the key publication output for most authors, especially if you're an early career researcher, okay, which is pretty important for you to get your journal, your papers published in journals. So besides digital technology, open access is something that is also gaining a lot of headway in the publishing world and society and communities, mostly in North America and Europe itself. Of course, it also will affect us in Asia to a certain extent, because if the subscription-based journals move to an open access model, that might mean you would need a little bit more funds to actually pay for the APCs. Okay, so in terms of open access, I'm going to talk about that more in a webinar, I think next month. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that webinar itself. Today, I'm not going to focus too much on open access. You also have scholarly collaboration networks such as ResearchGate, academia.edu, or even SSRN. This is like the Facebook for academia. Okay, so people like yourself would join these as members and try to interact, share news or share your papers, okay, to get collaboration or even find new jobs. And of course, measuring of research impact is also something that has been changing a lot for the past 2 to 3 years. Okay, there are a lot of new metrics coming out, like the H-index or metrics, things like that. So sometimes it gets a bit confusing. Okay, but nevertheless, I think most of you will be familiar with the SCI impact factor for journals, which is more or less the most widely accepted impact measurement metric in a sense. And of course, we also have a lot of free content. Some are legal, some are not so legal. So you just need to be aware, okay, which are the ones that you probably don't want to go there. So a little bit about the press itself. We are a department of the University of Cambridge. Okay, so we are actually the world's oldest publisher. We were founded in 1534. We published our first book in 1584. And now, of course, now we have to look towards the future with more investments in digital publishing. So this is something that you will see more and more coming out of Cambridge University Press in the next 5 years. Our mission and character, of course, is very simple. We are a not-for-profit organization. Okay, any additional earnings that we are earning from the sales of our books or our journals or any other digital products are all reinvested back into our publishing infrastructure, like technology and any other services. And of course, the overheads and the salaries of our staff. And we do also contribute maybe about 5 to 10% of what we earn back to the university itself, to ensure that the university also gets to enjoy the fruits of these publishing revenue itself. Okay, so this is something slightly different that commercial presses do not have. So in a way, we only have one shareholder, and that shareholder is the University of Cambridge. We are, of course, a global forward-looking publisher. So we try to work with the best scholars all over the world and the best universities around the world, including in Asia. And we also have a lot of offices on all the various continents. And of course, in Asia, we have offices in China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, of course, Singapore. And of course, the final thing that distinguishes us from most commercial publishers is we are very committed to quality. Okay, everything we do, we always think about quality. We want to publish the highest quality possible research. So how do we measure it? So okay, I'm going to show you something. Have a look at the video itself. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. So as you can see from the video, we measure our so-called quality by the number of awards that we win. And in terms of journals, we do have 6 journals that are actually on the top of their so-called impact factors among their specific disciplines. Journals like Behavioral and Brain Sciences, ACTA, Numerica, International Organization, Journal of Economic History, Microscopy and Microanalysis, and of course Theory and Practice of Logic Programming. Okay, so this is what you will know about the press. Of course, now we move on to the more specific topic of journals. Okay, so before we even start, I think it's a good thing to refresh your memory or let you know what is actually a scholarly journal. Okay, so a scholarly journal has 3 functions. Okay, back in the days in the 17th century, okay, there was a lot of issues in terms of claiming who was the first one to discover this idea or this theory, things like that. So this guy, Henry Oldenburg, okay, he came up, he thought of an idea that is to publish a scholarly journal to solve 3 problems, technological problems at that time. That is registration, dissemination, and archiving. Okay, for registration, it just means that you assert the ownership of an idea when you publish it in a journal. Okay. Secondly, by publishing in a journal, which of course will be printed and disseminated to all the scholars or the scholarly community, you will attract recognition. Okay, everybody, your peers will know. Okay, you are the one who discovered this theory, or you came out with this research results, and of course advance your career in the end. And the third function is archiving. For archiving, because there's no point in having oral records because anybody can create oral record. But when you create a journal, it sort of confirms that it's a permanent record, okay, of what has been researched, has been discussed. Okay, so that's the 3 actual functions that a scholarly journal will serve. Okay, of course, over time, since then, there are additional functions that sort of crop up and help authors, such as certification and filtration. Okay, certification here really means quality assurance of the kind of research that comes out of the journal itself. So, of course, over time, certain journals that have become more strict in selecting what to publish, and of course, they will try to publish the best research, and so it does improve or increase the reputation of the journal. So if you publish in that journal, you sort of improve the reputation of yourself as an author, as a scholar too. For filtration wise, it's actually just to help authors like yourself to navigate the vast quantity of journals that are being published. Currently, okay, now we have 33,000 journals across various subject areas. Of course, maybe within your certain disciplines that you write in or you publish in or you research in, it could be less than maybe 50, but that is still a very big number for you to filter through. So journals or rather journal publishers nowadays they do have a lot of tools to help you to sort of filter out and shortlist the kind of journals that would be suitable for the paper that you are writing on. And of course, the business models have sort of changed. In the past, it's always a subscription model to the printed issues. Of course, now, since 20 years ago, they also provide you the access to the digital versions, the journal issues and journal articles. Okay? So the readers could be the libraries or the individuals would have to pay an annual subscription fee to the publisher in order to access the digital or the print issues of the journal. So the author do not need to pay. Okay, and this model has been very so-called heavily used in humanities and social sciences, and of course in some STM subjects too. Okay. So the new model that has come out in the last maybe 5 years is open access, or rather Go Open Access journals. So for this open access model itself, the author, okay, would actually need to pay the processing charge. Okay. Dr. Chavez, can you just mute yourself, please? Thank you. Thank you. So any reader is able to access articles online for free. Okay, so you can access it for free because the charges have already been paid by the author itself. So this is initially started in the life sciences, but a lot of other subjects or even other publishers are moving to this model. Okay, so they are calling if they are changing from a subscription-based journal to an open access journal, they will call it a flip. Okay. So first thing off, okay, after we've discussed about what kind of a journal, what is a journal in first place, what is it meant for, first you have to research your journals, okay? You spend so much time on your research, so shouldn't you also spend a little bit more time to think about where you should publish your article to, okay? So you have to choose very carefully and thoughtfully. Try to aim for the right level of the journal, whether it's a more general journal or a very specific journal. General journals are journals that publish in a very broad subject discipline, and specific journals, they publish very narrowly, so their scope or usually be very highly defined, and you need to be aware of whether that journal is more suitable for your paper. And of course, you have to think about which are the ones that will do publish articles in your research area. You shouldn't try your luck and submit a paper to maybe a good, very reputable journal, even though they do not publish articles in your area. Very likely, they will just ignore it and decline it because they do have a very specific guidelines to work with in terms of accepting papers for review or publishing them. Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about that later. And of course, you have to think about the editors and editorial board members. If you are aware of the editors and the members of the editorial board of that journal itself, as in you know them personally, then definitely there is a higher chance of them accepting your paper, because that means they know you, as opposed they just see a name and don't really know the background or where are you trained at, things like that. So it's always good to get to know journal editors and editorial board members at conferences or other workshops or through other ways, okay, so that you find out more about how that journal operates. So here are some advice from journal editors, okay, as in our journal editors who are scholars also. So one of them says that you have to read the journal you want to publish in, or at least the abstracts, okay? Pay attention to what the journal is actively interested in. Look at the topics, the methods, theoretical approaches, okay? It will help you understand, okay, if your paper is really appropriate or not, okay? That means if you're using the same methods or the same theory, or you have the same kind of topics, then of course, there's a higher chance of your paper being accepted for review. And there's another comment that said that read the instructions for contributors, okay, for the journal you want to publish in. Okay, this is a very common advice. So if you are really keen on publishing that journal, that means it's first on your list, then please go and read up on the instructions first before you format the paper and then submit it. Okay. The more it follows the format of the journal, the less likely for the journal editor to reject it, especially if your methods, theoretical approaches, and topics are similar to what the journal is publishing in. So have to select a journal. Okay, this is more of a manual selection. Later I'll talk a little bit more about more automated kind of selection. So in manual selection is more time consuming, and that was how it has been done for maybe past 50, 60 years, okay, when there are more and more journals coming up, being published. So the first thing is to look at the hierarchy, okay. Be aware of the ranking of the journals that you want to publish in. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, or ABC, kind of which are the top tier journals, okay. When you publish in that, then of course you get more recognition from your university or the department, okay. Look at the research outcome, okay. Compare the significance of your findings or your arguments to what the journal will usually publish in, okay. If the significance of the research results in your paper is not that high, as in maybe it only has a local impact in the sense that it's only referring to a specific small area, maybe geographically, maybe look at a city, or only for a specific sub-discipline, then perhaps you should not try to aim too high, especially if it's your first or second paper. Okay, so the reason is because, as you know, there are competition. So you try to get the paper published as fast as possible. Okay, so to do that, you have to ensure that you match the paper to the right journal. Okay, so the trick is how to match it. Okay, so thirdly, you can also look at the readership. Okay, does the results only interest a very specialized group of researchers? Okay, so usually it's the people that you always cite from, or the people that you always discuss possible research projects with, and what are the kind of journals that they read and publish in. Okay, so if those journals are the same as what you want to publish in, that it's very likely that the journal editor would be happy to accept the paper and send it out for review. But it is a very separate group of readers as compared to what you will usually publish for or write for, then the risk is higher, as in you may not get to go to the move on to the next round of peer review. You get a desk reject. Okay. Number 4 is the scope. Okay, find out more about the aims and scope of the journal. Okay, all the journals nowadays, they have the homepage, and they always have a section on aims and scope. Just go to the website, read out on the aims and scope, and see if your paper will fit that of the journal that you want to publish in. 5th is citations. Okay, does your paper cite other published articles, okay, in the journal? Okay, so this is also a little bit more tricky in the sense that it doesn't necessarily mean if your paper cite the articles in the journal, then you will have a higher chance, but rather you are trying to impress the journal editor, okay? Because when you cite the articles in that journal that the editor is editing, that means you are aware of what the journal editor wants, okay? That means he might be willing to give you a chance to review, to send your paper out for review. So it's pretty important to read up the recent published articles of the journal, or relevant articles that relate back to what you are writing on, okay, and then try to cite it, okay, so that in a way it's sort of set up a conversation, okay, between yourself and the readers of the journals. So 6, of course, is the SSCI, or the SCI impact factor. What's the journal's impact factor? Okay. Of course, some of you may need to publish in a journal that has an impact factor. Okay. So if that's the case, then you wouldn't have no choice. You have to go to Web of Science and find the right journals that do have an impact factor, or is published by Scopus in that sense. Okay, to shortlist the kind of journals you want to publish in. And then you have to look at the article type. Okay, if your paper is original research or review article, which are the journals that will accept it? Okay, certain journals, they will only accept original research articles. Certain journals, they are also happy to publish review articles, but take note that review articles are usually commissioned by the journal editors. It's usually not so-called unsolicited. Okay. So that's number 7. For number 8 is punctuality. Okay, look at the publishing schedule of the journal. Does it publish on time? Does it usually have enough articles to make up an issue when it's published. Okay, usually if you see that the journal is always late, okay, because usually every issue will have actually publishing month. Okay, so if it's always very far behind the actual month itself, that could mean there's some issues in the management of the journal by the editor. Okay, could mean that the editor is a bit disorganized, or she doesn't have enough resources to manage the whole peer review process. So it could be that, it could also be that they don't receive enough submissions. Okay, not enough submissions. So they are always chasing up new papers to be published. So if you sort of submit to that kind of journal, then there's a likelihood that the paper could be published very late. Okay, so it might affect you in terms of submitting your assessment, every year's assessment to your superiors or your chair or your department head. Okay, so this is something you might want to also be aware of. And of course, you look at the editorial board, the publisher. Okay, who are the editors, board members, as I mentioned earlier. Okay? And is the publisher reputable? Okay, so most of the time, if you stick to the major publishers or the big societies or associations, it is usually all right. Okay, usually it's all right to publish them. Of course, with open access, okay, which comes to number 10. Do you prefer to publish in a traditional journal or open access journal? Okay, so in the US, in the Europe itself, there are some funding mandates whereby the authors themselves, okay, they have to publish in an open access journal. Okay, so they can't. Most other journals, the traditional journals, they can't submit it to, because some of them they don't offer open access, go open access. So, so for that reason, that's why there are a lot of new open access journals being started and published by smaller companies or smaller publishers all over the world. So in my open access webinar next month, I'll talk about how to avoid submitting it to a more predatory journal, so that it doesn't affect your research results in terms of getting the impact that you want for your research. Okay. So after you select the journal, you have a short list. Okay, so then what do? Okay, then you try to write it up, okay, format it, and then submit it to an international journal. Okay. So what is a journal article? Journal article is fit for purpose, original. Okay, so all journal articles have to be original. That means you should not have published it elsewhere. I think that I have received a query before on whether conference proceedings, those are considered published. If they do have an ISBN and they are sort of disseminated, then usually we consider that paper itself, that version of the paper, is as having been published. So you cannot use that paper anymore to sort of submit to a journal anymore, because it's sort of published. Okay, so this is something you need to be aware of. It has to be original, understandable, and written in good English. Has to be well organized, of appropriate length. Okay, so if you read the instructions, they will tell you, okay, the journal will say, okay, for original research articles submitted to this journal, keep the word length to maybe 8,000 words, 10,000 words, or 6,000 words. Okay, so they'll tell you what's the maximum number of words you can have it in the paper itself. And lastly, this is the responsibility of our publisher, but we as publishers need to make sure that all the articles are discoverable, stable, and citable. Okay, stable as in there's always an archive version available. Okay, in case the site goes down, there is also an archive file available. Discoverable, so we have to make sure that the metadata is shared with Google Scholar and any other indexing software, so that whoever searches for it can easily find the right article for their research and reading. And citable, of course, we need to make sure that the reference, okay, reference is provided correctly, and of course the DOI will be the most important. Okay, it need to have a DOI so that it's easier to locate and of course cite it if you need to. So here are some writing tips. Okay, so first off, if you're writing the paper itself, in the first paragraph or an introduction, you should always try not to include too many definitions, formula, or specialized terms, as in those terms that are specific to your research only, that are not widely used, okay, in the discipline that you are writing in. So the reason why we do that is because it will be very confusing to a reader, okay, because before they even know what your research is about, then you started telling them how to understand the research, okay. So you should always try to write about the background of the research or the paper itself, how or why was this research done in the first place? Is it because there was a gap in literature, there was some interesting thoughts from other researchers, okay. So just to slowly ease in the reader itself, so that you can talk about the so-called definition and formula in the following paragraphs, but usually not in the first paragraph as far as possible. And try to write in short sentences, okay, straight to the point, okay, just go straight to the point. This is not literary essays that you're writing, okay, not writing a novel, okay, you don't need to twist and turn, just go straight to the point. Try to write it in short sentences so that it's easier for you to write and easier for people to read and understand, okay. Avoid grammatical and notational errors, okay. So grammar, sometimes, you know, some of the reviewers or even editors, they are very particular about that because they sort of get annoyed, okay. So try not to annoy them first, and then when they read it, then they might give you a better review, okay. So these are things you try to clear up first before you even submit the paper, okay, to a journal. Test the readability, okay. In this case, you ask a colleague, okay, or a friend who is researching in another field, another discipline area, just to comment on the whether, you know, does it make sense? Is it smooth when you read from sentence to sentence or from paragraph to paragraph? Okay. So of course, that colleague, you should preferably you should get somebody who's pretty good in English, okay, to read it so that it can actually improve the paper. So the next one is talking about statistical significance. Okay, certain journals will say you try not to use certain symbols to denote statistical significance, but that one, you can go to the instructions for contributors to find out more. Similarly for the standard errors, okay, and confidence intervals. And of course, plagiarism, okay. I think almost all major journals nowadays, they do plagiarism checks on the papers that are submitted, rather accepted for review first. As far as possible, try to avoid this, because if you're a first-time author and you get caught for this, it might be more difficult for you to submit back to the journal again, okay, in future, especially if you're able to correct it, okay, because they might have a poor impression of your work already, because you're not recognizing what others have done or researched or written. So as far as possible, try not to plagiarize, okay, cite it, or give very clear indication that this text or these results came from some other papers that were published, okay, and acknowledge their work appropriately. So one journal at a time, which is exclusive submission, okay. Do not submit your paper to more than one journal at any time, okay. Just one journal at any one time. It's only when that journal editor tells you that he has sort of rejected it, or he says that, okay, you can still submit it after you made the changes, then you can decide whether you want to submit it back to that journal or you can submit it to another journal. Okay? If you try to submit a paper to more than one journal at a time, and the journal editor or both journals find out, that you might get blacklisted. Okay, because the idea is all journals want to have exclusive so-called rights to the paper itself. Okay, they just want to publish. I mean, this helps to build up a reputation in a sense, lah. So of course they want the best. So they don't want too many similar papers going around, because otherwise, in terms of future authors want to cite, which journal should they cite if both papers are the same, right? So it gets more confusing and complicated for everybody. So that's the reason why it should only submit to submit to only one journal at any time. Then authorship, okay. This has been discussed before in a lot of ethical publishing kind of seminars and workshops, but well, it's really up to you, because most of the time we would advise you to only list the co-authors who have made some kind of contribution, okay. Maybe they do the statistical analysis, they done the field research in for you, or I mean, usually it's a collaboration, okay. Most especially in the natural sciences, is always collaboration kind of research. So of course you have to discuss, okay, who will be the first author, who will be the second author, and things like that. So this should be done at the outset. Okay, try not to invite reputable scholars to be an author just to hope that can get accepted easier, because you might be found out if later the journal editors ask about it. Okay, they ask, what has this so-called reputable scholar done in the research itself? Then if you cannot answer that, then your paper will be so-called rejected. And of course, if you are going to submit your paper to that journal that you're going to that you want to publish in, you want to make sure that you follow the style. So the way to do that is to look at the instructions to contributors, and if you have access to the articles that are published in the journal, read them and try to follow their style of how the other authors have written their papers. Okay.
One sentence per idea.
And of course, try to make the article concise in the sense is, like I mentioned earlier, one sentence per idea and one idea per sentence. Okay, just keep an idea to one sentence and then move on to another sentence and just continue on, so that it does make the reading of the article easier and smoother, especially for certain I guess sciences where there's a lot of theory involved. So it's best to make it simple, okay, for other readers or even early career researchers who want to cite a paper. Okay, let them understand it easily. And lastly, of course, you can read the journals published articles, like I mentioned earlier, to see how yours can fit in. Okay, so the more you know about what that journal has published, the more likely you can sort of fit your paper in the way of writing it, to fit it into the conversation that's ongoing among all the articles in that journal itself. Okay, so usually the journal editors do have specific preferences for what kind of papers that they want to publish in. Okay, so of course, once the journal editors change, then that might change too. Okay, so this is something you need to keep in mind. So it doesn't mean that if that style is has been sort of followed for the last 5 years, it will be followed for the next 20 years. No, it's not the same. It's not necessarily the case. It all depends on the field of research itself, and of course the journal editor, and of course sometimes it looks at the publishing strategy of the journal publisher too. So an article structure usually follows this kind of a model. There's always a title, article title, an abstract, and keywords. Okay, so abstract and keywords are quite important, simply because journal editors, when they first come into contact with your submission, they do not have that much time to read through the whole paper. So they'll still scan through all the submissions and just look at the abstracts. Okay, and those that interest them a lot, then of course they'll read the maybe the introduction and the conclusion, and they really like it, then of course they'll sort of accept it and send it out for peer review.
Mm-hmm.
So abstract is a pretty important part of the whole paper itself. The title itself is also important. So the title is, preferably you shouldn't write too long a title, unless maybe your research discipline is in the biomedical sciences, which is unavoidable. Okay, but if you're in the rest of like social sciences or humanities, then preferably don't have it too long and too clever. Okay, I know some authors like to come up with clever titles, to impress the readers. But if you are just an early career researcher and your career is online, of course, you want to make sure that your title distills the essence of the paper itself. Okay. Then when it comes to the main text, then usually they will have introduction, methods, results, discussions. Okay, this is usually sort of standard, but do take a closer look at what that journal you want to publish in specifies. Okay, if they say that you're going to follow the specific headings to use in the paper, just follow it. Okay, and of course you need a conclusion. Okay, if you do not have a conclusion in the paper at all when you submit it, then it's definitely going to be that's rejected. Okay, there's no point in publishing a paper that has no conclusion. Okay, and of course if there's acknowledgements, you need to make acknowledgements. You can include them at the end or at somewhere else as required by the journal. References also very important. Make sure you include all the necessary references, okay, in the paper before you submit it. Make sure there are no missing references. Okay, I'm aware that there are a lot of sort of references or citations software that you can use. So make use of them. Okay, I think most libraries will have them available for your use. And of course, supplementary data if you need to also include that. So the best practice I would recommend is, firstly, like I mentioned earlier, is write a very clear, informative abstract. Okay. Usually a well-written abstract would actually help you, okay, to also answer any queries the journal editor may have at the start. Okay. So writing a clear, good abstract is halfway there, okay, to getting a paper accepted in the journal. And of course, you can read all the abstracts that of the papers that have been published in the journal itself, okay, so that it'll be easier, okay, for you to sort of follow the kind of writing style that they adopt for that journal itself. Our second practice is to obey the rules in the instructions for contributors, okay. Make sure that your paper is also written in good English, okay. If you need help in the English language itself, either get somebody to help you to vet through and correct all the grammar issues, or you can engage a language editor, okay, to help you with that. Of course, you must have a conclusion, okay, must have a good conclusion, and the message must show that the paper is important to the target audience itself. So in the cover letter that you send together with the paper itself, you have to tell the journal editor, okay, and the reviewers, okay, that why is this paper very important, okay, just state very clear, this made a major contribution to this field of research because so we got this result and it's very significant after some analysis, okay, something like that in the cover letter. And of course, lastly is the one journal at a time, okay, just keep this in mind. And how would you try to avoid getting an immediate rejection? Of course, similar to what I mentioned earlier, don't make the mistake of submitting a paper when it's not ready. Okay, if readers or journal editors can't even understand what you're trying to say, then of course they will not even accept it. Okay, so make sure your English is good. Make sure that there's a conclusion. And sometimes they may say there's insufficient originality or importance. Okay, so if it's insufficient originality, then perhaps you need to go back and work on it some more. Okay, if it's not important enough to that journal, that just means that you have to lower down your expectations and move down maybe to a lower tier journal, okay, and submit to that journal. Then maybe that you will be more successful in a sense. And of course, there are some obvious scientific or logical flaws in terms of analysis. Okay, so this is something that good to get a third person to help you look at the analysis that you've done. Okay, so that help to avoid this kind of issues when you submit the paper. And why is the paper important to the target audience? State this clearly. Okay, as I mentioned in the introduction, conclusion, abstract. Okay, I have to emphasize this. Okay, because these are some things that most first-time authors they forgot or they didn't look at it. So if you can do this very good, very well, I will assure you that the chances of getting accepted for review doesn't mean getting accepted for application. Okay, just for review is definitely much higher, okay, than the rest. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, clear informative abstract, choose the appropriate journal, okay, check the scope, okay, follow instructions, meet the submission system requirements. And that's about it for submitting a paper to a journal. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about writing because this is not a writing webinar. Okay, so if you need additional sources or resources, I can point you to some books that we published to help you to write a better paper in that sense. So I'm going to talk about peer review. Okay, so before I start, I want to do a poll. Okay, just to check whether you are aware of what kind of peer review models are being used by journals. So I hope you guys can help me a bit, and then I'm launching the poll right now. So you can actually answer the question and choose one answer which you think is correct. Thanks. Okay, 30 seconds more. Okay. 5 more seconds and then I'll have to end the poll. And I'll move on with the presentation. Okay. So as you can see, half of you guys thinks that is the third answer, whereby journals do use single blind, double blind, and open peer review. And some of you think it's single blind and double blind only, and some of you think it's double blind. And of course, small percentage thinks there's only single blind. Okay. So the answer is actually yes. We use journals itself. They have the choice of choosing what type of peer review models to use, depending on the subject areas or the disciplines they are in, and whether they are open access or not. Okay. So single blind, double blind, and of course open peer review are all being used by all journals nowadays. Okay. So for single blind, what it means is that the author doesn't know the reviewer's identity. Double blind means both reviewer and the author doesn't know each other at all. And open means, of course, the author and reviewer knows each other. Okay. So which type of journals actually use single blind? Okay. Usually it's the science journals. Okay. So they prefer, okay, there's a preference, not really a must, but more of a preference of using a single blind model of peer review. And then for double blind is usually used by social sciences and humanities. There is a small group of journals and experimental in a sense that are using open peer review. Okay, open peer review. So within open peer review, there's also a smaller sort of a subset of peer review called the post-publication peer review, okay, model itself. So this only started in the last few years, and it's usually used by experimental open access publishers, okay. And these are where the manuscripts are only reviewed after they have been published online. Okay, so they do not review the manuscripts and then publish it, but they publish it first online, and then they start the review process online. Okay, so the authors will post the manuscript online, then the reviewers will post their comments and suggestions online, and then of course the authors will respond to them, make the necessary revisions, and then it goes on and goes on until the journal editor says stop. Okay, the journal paper is good enough, so we will just end there. Okay, that it will be the version of record for that paper itself. Okay, so that's how it works for post publication peer review. So these kind of reviews are good in the sense that not only does the author and reviewer know what their what are each other's comments, but readers like yourself can also have a look at them. Okay, if you want to. So there are a few examples of journals or publishers or service providers using such kind of model. For us, actually, we have a journal which is called Behavioral and Brain Sciences that's sort of experimenting on this model itself. So besides that, we have Papier. Okay, Papier is another company. Hypothesis is e-letters. Okay, Science Open, and of course F1000 Research. Okay, which is now owned by Taylor and Francis. So now that I explained a little bit about the kind of models of peer review that is used, what are the stages during the peer review process? Assuming that you go through, you get past the gatekeeper, the journal editor. The journal editor says, yes, okay, let's send it for you. Okay. So firstly, of course, there is the desk review. Okay. So the editor-in-chief or the main editor of the journal will, of course, assess the paper that was submitted. Okay. They'll have a lot of criteria to assess it, but usually they'll just see whether it's within the scope. Okay, is the English language good? Does it cite some of the articles and past published articles in journals? Okay, things like that. So if they think that, okay, this is suitable, this is promising, okay, then we will send it out for peer review. Okay, so the acceptance rate at this stage, at the desk review stage, it does vary a lot according to the discipline itself. Okay, it depends on the reputation of the journal, and how often does it publish? How many articles do they publish each year? And of course, certain subject disciplines are very journal specific, like the medical sciences. Okay, they rarely write books; they only publish journal articles. Okay, so that's the reason why if you're in the medical sciences, you submit to any journals at all, the acceptance rate will be quite low. Okay, because everybody is writing articles and competing against everybody. But if you're in humanities, maybe English literature, okay, which is more of a books kind of a discipline, okay, so they prefer to write books than journal articles. So if you submit a journal article to an English literature journal, then perhaps the acceptance rate would be much higher as compared to a medical journal, okay. And also more reputable journals have received more submissions, so they do have a budget every year on how many papers they can publish. So the acceptance rate will of course be much lower. I would say the acceptance rate will usually range between maybe 15% to 50%, okay? So it does depend, okay? And also depends on the journal itself. So it is not that useful at this stage to know the acceptance rate for desk review, but more for after it's gone through peer review. So usually what happens at the peer review stage is the editor-in-chief will invite at least two reviewers, two experts, okay, to read the paper, okay? They'll give them about 2 to 4 weeks time to complete it, okay? And then the two reviewers will provide their reports and of course suggest whether to accept, revise, resubmit, or decline. And the decision will actually be made by the journal editor, okay, whether to accept what the reviewers have said or not, or to make their own decisions, okay? So here you can see the flow chart, okay, of the actual review process itself, okay. So article is submitted, editor screens the paper, it might get rejected, could be a lot of reasons, or it gets accepted for review. And of course, the peer review process goes on, and there might be a need to do some revise and resubmissions, okay. So revise and resubmit is a very common option that most authors will receive, okay, the first time their paper gets reviewed. So you don't get too upset if you get a revise and resubmit decision. It usually means that, okay, that means there's potential, okay, potential for the paper to be published. It just means that it needs a little bit more work, okay, as suggested by the reviewers, okay. So perhaps you are keen to get the paper published in the paper, in the journal itself. So how should you respond to the comments of the reviewers, okay? Because after you revise the actual paper itself, you need to provide a response, okay? So in the response itself, you should always be respectful, okay? Even if they were a bit rude, you should still be respectful, okay? Keep your cool and acknowledge the time and the kind of effort that they have taken, okay, to review the paper. So try to engage positively, constructively with the criticisms, okay? Don't be defensive or aggressive, okay? That's always not good when you're talking to somebody, you don't know who is it, okay? That's the problem, okay? So be positive, be constructive. And the way to respond is either by common themes that is found in both reports, or you can just address them reader by reader. So in that case, what I'm really saying is that if there are common themes, you can just say in both reports, this issue was brought up. This is what I did, okay, to the paper, how I address it, okay. Or if there are no common themes, you just say for reader A, these are the kind of queries or issues that they have stated. So this is what I've done, okay, to address them, okay. So always try to be clear what are the issues that you agree with and what you disagree with. Okay, that is actually all right if you disagree with any comments or criticisms, as long as you can defend it. Okay, as long as you can defend it, and of course, you also need to tell them, okay, if I agree with it, then I will change this and this and that. If you don't agree with it, you can also say I will try to clarify it and make it more clearer. Perhaps I must make too many assumptions. So that's the reason why that reader made that comment. Okay, something like that. So now I move on to publishing ethics, which is very important nowadays. Okay, so we are a member of Committee on Publication Ethics, and from time to time, our journal editors face a lot of cases, okay, of so-called misbehavior of authors. Okay, the first case, author requests a permission to publish review comments that are received. So in that sense, this is not allowed, okay? Whatever is done during the peer review process is confidential, okay? So it's only meant for your eyes as author and also the editors and reviewers only. You should not share it at all with anybody, okay? Especially you do not publish it online. So this author, the paper was rejected, okay? So he or she actually named the reviewer and criticized the reviewer. Say he's a stupid reviewer, don't understand what my research is all about, something like that. And of course, when the reviewer found out, of course, he's angry, because that is supposed to be anonymous, okay? Usually either double blind or single blind means that the reviewer's identity should not be made known to the author, okay? So of course, a journal editor will go back to the author and say, hey, you shouldn't do that, okay? Please be more gentlemen or cordial to the people who make an effort to review it, okay? So in the end, the author actually apologized, okay, to the reviewer. So in another case, the author requests certain experts not to be included in the peer review process. So this is something that's not set in stone yet. It's up to the journal editor to decide. Okay, certain journals, they would prefer you to suggest with referees. Certain journals say no, we will decide who we want to review. So it's really up to the journal editor to decide. Okay, so just follow what the journal editor says lah, in this case. Publication of the manuscript, okay, on an external website after acceptance, but prior to journal publication, okay. When you receive a notification or news that your manuscript has been accepted for publication, that doesn't mean that you can now actually post it online for everybody to read, okay. There are certain so-called rules, okay. So you have to take it down, okay. You can't publish it. There is a sort of an embargo period, okay. Unless it is a open access, Go open access journal, then of course you can do that. But if it's not a Go open access journal, there's no free access in a sense, then you are not supposed to do that. You are probably allowed to do it maybe 6, 12, or even 24 months after the journal article has been published online. Lastly, of course, this is the best. This author sends a nice gift to the journal editor, okay, but his or her manuscript is still under review, okay. So this is a conflict of interest. You can't do that, okay. Then you definitely the editor will know and return the gift. So here are also other ethical issues that you may have faced or you may have heard of, such as duplicate submission, which I mentioned earlier, plagiarism, non-disclosure or conflict of interest, usually is commercial conflict of interest or family conflict of interest, okay. Significant errors in the publication, which is also quite important, okay, quite important, because you may need to make an errata or publish an errata to accompany the article so that you don't mislead the readers. Not conforming to national, local, and institutional laws and requirements. Okay. Copyright issues, okay, so you didn't obtain any permission to reproduce third-party content. So here we, of course, I have sort of a list of possible journals selection service providers in a sense, okay. So we are partnered with this company called AJE. So if you are keen to try them out, of course it's not free. You just go to the URL and find out more. Okay, so they'll probably tell you how they go about selecting or recommending the right journal for your paper. Similarly, if you have a paper that will be published in other journals by other publishers, okay, you can go to their specific services that they have, okay. And of course, if you're just keen to find out the top journals, just go to Web of Science and Scopus to find out which are the top journals that you want to publish in. In terms of editing, translation services, we also partner with the same company, AJE, okay? And they claim that they have a lot of qualified editors. So of course, you can just go back to them and ask, find out more if you need such a service. And in terms of books, you can see that we have published quite a fair bit of books. This is just a small selection, okay, to help early career researchers to write papers, okay. How to write and publish a scientific paper, I find that it is the most useful one. If you're very new to it, okay, it has a lot of useful tips. If a library has a copy of it, try to borrow it, or if not, try to persuade the librarian to do so. Or if you have the funds, purchase a paperback of it, okay. So for the other titles that we have are also quite useful, but they are more advanced in a sense, yeah. And recently, we also launched a sort of a preprint server, okay, called Cambridge Open Engage, okay. So it's a site for you to upload and share and advance your research that has not been submitted to a journal, okay, just to get some feedback. So it doesn't accept any papers that relates to clinical or medical research, okay? So to be aware of that, but we do have a advisory panel to help us to screen through all the submissions. So go to the URL, find out more. There's also FAQ sites available on the website. And I guess that comes to the end of our webinar for around 4 p.m. now. So actually, thank you very much for staying with me until the end. I can take questions now. So what I would do is actually I'll just go through the individual queries posed and I'll try to answer them one by one. Okay, I hope that's fine with you.